Hello, I'm Rick Stivers. Today we're going to work on this Johnson Citation 110B reel. I'm going to show you how to take it apart, how to clean it, how to lubricate it and put it back together. If you've never worked on a reel, any specific reel before, you should try to go out on the internet and try to find a schematic sheet for it, like this one, which will list all the parts, show you the direction and everything that they go in. It's not a set of instructions. It's not going to tell you how to do it, which is why I'm shooting this video, but it will show you specifically what order of assembly the parts go. So let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do is take the cover off. It just unscrews counterclockwise. If it's dirty inside, a lot of times what will happen is the line comes in, the rotor will spin around and it will spin the line around as it's winding it in, and it will sling that water and dirt all up inside this cap, the cover, and so you'll have to clean this out inside. Clean it out good, it's ready. Next thing you're going to want to do is take this nut off. Now, a lot of them will look like this, but let me show you, for instance, on this old Johnson Century. On this one, that nut has broken away and all that's left is the inside nut. You can just take that off. If that's what you've got, you can still use the reel just like that. You just go ahead and unscrew the nut itself instead of the finger nut that you have on this one. This is what they all came with, but if you look carefully at this one, you will see there's cracks in it. So it's going to eventually be just like the one in that one. But for now, it's still working. Alright, once you've got it there, you take the rotor off. You can clean the inside of it. This one I've just recently cleaned, but you can wipe it all out. And I've greased it with just a little bit of grease. Doesn't need a lot. Too much grease collects stuff. Alright, once you're inside, you've got this clip. You can slide the clip off. With the clip off, you can now remove the rotor. The rotor has got these notches on it, and you'll notice on this particular reel, this is because this is the Johnson Century, or Citation and Centuries are both this way, this spool is reversible. You can use this reel either left-handed or right-handed without having to rewind all the line. All you just do is take the spool off, flip it over the opposite direction, and wind it in. If when you get it all back together, you find that your line is going out when you wind it instead of in, you have to take it back apart and flip that spool over. Now, let's get to this. We will take this nut off. And the handle comes off. Now you've got two screws, this one and this one. They're on this right-hand side. You will take them off. Now, if this has been reversed around to become a left-handed, you notice this L and this R, that's for left-handed and right-handed, and currently it's in the right-hand position. If someone has switched it over to the left-hand position, this panel is going to be on the opposite side, so you'll have to go to the opposite side to find the screws. So, but your screws will be on whichever side your handle was on. And you can move this to the center to get it out of the way for taking the screws out. On this particular reel, these two screws are identical, so you don't have to worry too much about getting them mixed up. But on some reels, as you take them out, you want to look and make sure that the screws are the same length before you get them mixed up with any others. Alright, once you've got those two screws out, your side panel comes off, and your main gear will now slide out of that side panel. And it's ready to be cleaned. With that out, you come to the opposite side and pop this side off. Now, once that's off, your trigger button will fall off. With the trigger button off, you can now push in your rotor shaft, and notice it's not going to come all the way out from the back. You have to bring it out and then tilt it to have it come out the front, or out the front side of the case. It won't come out through this slot in the back. Okay, once you have it to this position, you're ready to clean. Very seldom will you ever need to take off your drag nut. If you do, for some reason, need to take it off, what you can do, see how it lifts up? It's spring loaded. You will have to lift it up and hold it in that position while you unscrew the screw. The same goes for putting it back in. Now, once you've got it there and put it back in, you will have to adjust it so that right there is a good medium drag. There, it won't hardly come out at all. And at 0, it will be very easy drag. But you'll do that by simply leaving it right there, lifting it up and adjusting the screw in until you get it to the position that you want it, and then make sure that the screw pops back into position. You scrub all these parts up. I usually clean them with WD-40. And no, I'm not a spokesman for WD-40, but that just happens to be what I use. You could use any one of the other penetrants. So that just happens to be the one I use. Once you get to this point, you clean all the parts. I'm not going to sit here and show you how to scrub and clean all the parts, but I will tell you that on the gears, I never use a wire brush. I use a toothbrush. On plastic parts, I use a softer bristle toothbrush. On metal gears, I use a heavy hard toothbrush. Clean those parts with the WD-40. Once they're all clean, I'll come back and I'll show you how I lubricate this to put it back together. Okay, we're back. I've got all the parts clean. First thing I'm going to tell you is that there's 2 different greases and 1 oil that I use. The primary grease that I use for all the gears is the Penn Precision Reel Grease. You can use any reel grease that you want, but I use the Penn Precision Reel Grease. That's for all the gears. For all of my drags, I use Cal's 2-speed conversion universal reel and drag grease. And for the shafts and other small moving parts that could bind down with grease, I use Penn Precision Oil. All right, let's get to putting this back together. The first part we're going to lubricate and reinstall is going to be the drive shaft assembly. Notice that it will move up and down. I've had some of these over the years that have bound up, but I have usually found that if I can grab hold of them and put a lot of penetrating oil on them and lubricant, I can get them to break free so that this will slide up and down on this spring again. Once it does, usually I can lubricate it and put it back in and it'll be fine. For this part here where the shaft slides up and down, I will use the gear grease. And I use a paintbrush for that. You want just a little bit of grease. You don't want a lot. Just enough to make sure it stays lubricated. Okay? Then once you've got the grease in there, slide the gear up and down the shaft a little bit, make sure it's free. Then I add just a little bit of Penn oil to the shaft. Now some people will grease this shaft, but I tend to find that when this shaft is greased, this one and the main gear shaft, I tend to find that when those are greased instead of oiled, it slows the reel down a lot. It makes it feel very sluggish. So I use oil on those now. So take the gear, the axle shaft, slide it up in between the grooves, and slip it into the hole. Slide it forward. There it is. Now that will stay until we put in the button. Now the button has got 2 lube points. One is going to be right here at where the shaft for this assembly goes through. Okay, and you can see this one is kind of shiny and slightly burred just a little bit from not having lubricant on it over the years. So you want to make sure to lubricate that good so that it's not digging into it. Even though it's plastic, that's a brass shaft and it will tear it up. So we're going to put just a little bit of grease in there, just a little bit, and one right at the back of this where the button rides on the axle shaft. Slide it in from the top so that it comes in. There it goes. You will see it will sit just like that, and it will push in just like that. Now we can slide the side cover back on. Line that shaft up with that top hole that we just greased. And when I was a kid, I had no trouble lining these up, but as an adult, they seem to Have a whole lot more trouble getting them to go in. There we go. Don't use force. Wiggle, finagle, do whatever you want, but do not use force on that. Okay, that part is now in and functional. And moves freely. Okay, we'll set it this way so the side cover will be pushing down into it. Now we've got the other side cover. On this side, you've got these two anti-reverse dogs, one on each side. And if you notice, as you rotate this lever, one of those is going to come up and the other one's going to go down. So what you can do is you rotate each one over. You can put just a little bit of grease under whichever side comes up. Rotate it back the other way and slide just a little bit of grease under the other one, and then put a little bit of grease on the top of each one. There you go. You have greased the anti-reverse dogs. Now you've got your axle shaft, which you cleaned up earlier and inspected all the gear teeth. Make sure they all look real good. Make sure your shaft is good. Once that's done, you're going to put a little bit of grease onto each of these gear teeth. But I'm not going to put it on that shaft because, like I said, if I put grease on the shaft, I find that it makes the reel sluggish. It doesn't seem to like to turn as well. So I use oil on that. Now, slide the main gear back into the side cover. All right. And it's ready to go back on. Slip it in. There we go. And now it's time to install the two screws. All right, that should move freely from side to side, and it's time to put the handle back on. Tighten the nut down, and there you go. Put it in position. In left hand it runs that way, and right hand it winds that way, and the anti-reverse works. All right, now you're ready to put the drag system back on. This is where I change greases. This is where I use the universal drag grease for years, and I mean literally years. I always use just regular grease on that until I discovered Cal's drag grease, and it works really good on all the big flat drags, so I go ahead now and I use it on my other reels as well. Anything that has a drag, and that's what this is. This is the drag. Okay, and that drag will ride against the inside of the spool. And you don't want to use a lot, just a little bit of grease is all that's required. Okay, now if you look at your reel, when you wind it, the direction you're going, whether you're going left hand or right hand, see the direction that the shaft is turning? Well, as it rotates that direction, that's the same direction that you want your line to be going in. Now, if your spool has no line on it at all, because you've just stripped it all off to redo it, hey, don't worry about it. But if you got the line on and you just want to do it, then just slide it on. Now the line's wrapping this way, which is the same direction that your rotor was, that your axle shaft was turning, because of the way you got it set, and now you're good there. Next thing you want to do, slip your clip on. Yep, and I have to back this off just a little bit and push the button. There we go. Slide your clip in, that holds the spool in place so that it can't fall off. You're down to three parts left now. Your rotor assembly goes on. It's got a D hole in it to match up with the flat spot on the shaft. Set that on there. Take your nut, spin your nut on, push the button out because that'll give you more shaft to screw it onto. All right, there we go. And put your string through your cover, screw the cover down, push the button, you should have free spool, rotate the handle and it should wind in. You should now have a drag, very light drag in the 0 position, very heavy drag in the 8 position, come back to 4, you should have a nice medium drag, nice and smooth. That's what your drag, the cow's drag grease does for you. Okay, it doesn't come out and it comes out in a nice steady smooth operation. All right, there you go. There's a Johnson Citation 110B reel. I hope some of you have found this helpful.